Good to go there, Peter.
We're live.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome to Living in the Scriptures Live. We're here with Caleb. Brian is still on vacay. So we're here to look back at the last 2 weeks, looking at the woman at the well and also John the Baptist. And today, the questions I have for us is more about experience than anything else. I want to kind of ask questions about like how we've kind of felt like we've experienced what John the Baptist experienced and what the woman at the well experienced. So maybe like I said, kind of like coming out of the gates. Remember, Jesus claims that he is the truth, the way, the truth, and the life. And he demonstrates it in kind of interesting ways, right? He comes to John, who's in prison. John comes to him and says, "Hey, are you the one? Like, Jesus, you are the one, and I'm in prison. How does that add up?" So maybe I should ask you. I mean, I'm not going to recap the sermon. You guys can go check it out on our YouTube page. But for you, Caleb, um, have you ever felt like John the Baptist? Kind of that idea of like, I'm in prison, things aren't quite working out with me, and you are the Lord. What gives, right? Like, I'm wondering, are you God, Jesus? Do you care? Have you ever felt like, you don't have to give lots of details or anything as much as you want, but
Sure.
have you ever felt like John the Baptist?
No, it's hard for me to. I think it's hard for me. I shouldn't say it's hard for me to relate. But John the Baptist in that situation is not one that I have. And I don't mean to take the wind out of the sails here because I think it's a valid question that many people feel. But for me, I think in John the Baptist is in a position where he has like really followed Christ wholeheartedly, and he's really been faithful to God over an extended period of time. And at the end of that, it's really not going as he expects, and it begins to weigh on him. And he's wondering, the investment that I've made, which is huge, I've really put my life here for the Lord. Is it in vain, or am I waiting for someone else? Are you the guy that I've hung my hopes on? And I haven't had, and I say I haven't had that instance, and I think it's because I haven't felt that way because I don't know that I have experience. Like when I look at my life, I feel like there's a pretty big gap between me and John the Baptist. And um, any of the times that I'm really struggling, it's really easy to find, for me at least. That's not. It's a question of more of a question of I haven't been I haven't been as faithful, right? Or I can see the flaws in my own life really readily, and it's really easy for me to chalk up different experiences I have to probably this is on me. Um, and so are there times where I've had disappointments? Yep. Are there times when I it hasn't gone as I expected? Yep. And I think in the kind of in the micro sense, yeah, there are times where I have to remind myself that hardship and the struggle that is my life experience, from time to time, that it's not one that I'm going to escape. There isn't like you can't set your life on autopilot in the good lane. You know what I mean? Like that's not the way of God. It doesn't matter where we are. I think we will encounter struggle, um, and at times I have to remind myself of that. But I don't think, yeah, that's I think as close as I get to what I imagine John's experience was like in that.
I think that's a good answer, like in the sense that I don't think we were none of I've never experienced prison. I've never experienced, that kind of hardship. And yet, like you were saying, in our own little disappointments, to kind of really realize that, none of us escape hardships, that even Jesus said, in this world there will be trouble, and but I give you peace. But I know, like I said, in my journey, I think there's been a couple of times where there's a little bit of disillusionment with, especially when I first came to Christ, maybe like 4 or 5 years into it, and realizing I'm not as far along as I thought, and this journey wasn't what I really thought it was. going to be like. And yet, it just kind of comes back to what you said, just reminding ourselves truly what Jesus promises, and that he never leaves or forsakes us, and that there are some things that, the Christian life is going to be difficult. Nowhere in scripture does it say, the Christian life is easy. Instead, more often than not, Paul talks about the Christian life as a struggle,
Yeah.
and as a war going on. And it's not a, here's your Christian life, you get to hang out on a beach and drink nice little drinks and always in the sunshine. That's awesome. Like I said, then, when I think about the woman at the well, she kind of runs into town and says, come meet a person that has told me everything about me. Have you ever had an experience like that, where you kind of feel like God has really touched the deepest core of who you are? And I don't think that's an exaggeration for this woman. She's feeling like this Jesus has touched me at the deepest part of who I am. And like I said, share as much or as little as you feel comfortable. But have you ever felt that?
Yeah. Yeah. I woke up. How many years ago would it have been? I woke up be close to this time of year too, in 2000. I think that's right. I have to think about this again. Anyway, around 2010, I went to sleep, uh, and I woke up, and life was different when I woke up. And um, there was a fundamental shift in me. I felt confident where after years I had felt um, like aimless and uncertain of my future. And whereas before I really didn't know where I stood with God, I felt all of a sudden a great confidence that He was with me and for me. And um, inside myself, different desires or interests shift. And I don't think I wasn't a Christian before, but God was really, really had taken me through a valley, taken me into a valley of, and there was a season of just really pruning a whole bunch of my life away. It felt really, really, it was a very hard time, a very challenging time where I got to see who I felt I really was. And the way that I look at my life, there was a season where that season was over, and it was a very, very marked beginning, bang. And from that point on, within a couple months, graduated, got a girlfriend, got engaged, got married, got a house. Like all of these things happened. God's blessing just like broke out into my life. And during that time, it was just a period of incredible personal renewal. Um, Things that I didn't think would be possible in my life unfolding, and I was just walking into these blessings, and I knew God was at work, and I knew that He had done something amazing in me, and I just felt like I need to share. Like I don't know that I shared a ton. I would have been ready to in a heartbeat. Like I just in such an incredible time of life, um, and I felt like these streams of living water, that God had totally renewed me, and the period of pruning and darkness was over, and it was a brand new dawn. I felt it would never be the same again. And I think in a lot of ways, I haven't been the same. In other ways, maybe I've regressed a little bit, but on a fundamental level, I've never been where I was before that. Um, and I think the big thing was wanting to share my life with someone, and it was a couple, well, it was a couple days later where I felt like, Bev, like I know I'm gonna marry you, and you can say I'm gonna propose. You can say what you like. Like I was just so full, and I was ready to share with everybody. And I've had periods in the past too where I've really felt people need to know Jesus. Like really excited about the fact that they get that and understand that. I wish I was more like that though these days still, where the excitement is there, like not just the knowledge, but like the enthusiasm. You know, I wish.
Yeah,
I,
totally.
I kind of have a desire for that again. And you can't. In some ways, it's like, well, you've already, you know, you've encountered Christ, you know him, so you don't get the initial shock anymore. You have to work it out yourself a little bit. Not that God doesn't renew us, but
Yeah, I do believe that the Holy Spirit occasionally breathes a little more fire into us. That's kind of like the coming pouring of the Spirit out, and we continue to pray for that. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that little testimony. I think for me, when thinking about God telling me everything, was actually my conversion.
yeah,
Like I remember kind of being in the church for about 3 years, and I could probably articulate Jesus, I could articulate the gospel, I knew what it was, but somehow there was just some sort of resistance in my heart, and maybe it's just, like, not wanting to give it up or not wanting to kinda take that commitment, and I remember very similar. Like, I actually was watching a movie, then kind of after the movie, kind of went to sleep and felt like, oh my goodness, um, I need Jesus. It just kind of dawned on me that my only hope, it felt like, that I would suffocate without Jesus. Somehow, like that was, he was the meaning of my life. I had been searching for meaning for a
yeah,
long time.
yeah,
I had, felt like, um, he knew every part of who I was and was like, come to me. And so it's hard to explain, but somehow it was just like I got baptized, I think the week after. I kind of went to see my pastor and just said,
nice,
I
yeah,
really need to do this. And and yeah, there it was. And that, like you said, I like what you said, Caleb, about like and wanting that feeling, that sense, more and more. And it's just kind of looking back at it, and it's a good thing because we're going to look at this story again in 2 weeks' time, and that the woman at the well runs into town and just shares the gospel. And I think, that's how the gospel went out. It wasn't like professional preachers. It was just people living out the joy of salvation. Now, that kind of sparked the church in the first century. So
yeah,
we'll talk about that in about 2 weeks.
sweet,
But sweet, exactly. And then you know, I think it was this reading of the woman at the well story that really shocked me when I really sat down and think about it. That after he encounters Jesus, nothing happens, and yet everything happens,
yeah,
right? Nothing, like like her circumstance changes nothing, but somehow something changes in her. How would you explain that? And maybe, like, have you experienced something like that where you feel like nothing's changed, but everything has changed?
mm. Well, that was my situation. Like when I woke up differently, like um,
Yeah.
I mean, in a sense, nothing external had changed at all, zero. But I was different. Um, you know, I think in smaller ways we experience, and perhaps this is like the experience of Christ and the experience of God through prayer, because so often prayer does not bring about an immediate change in our circumstance, but it absolutely does reorient us to the peace of God, to the provision of God, and our spirit. It's not even our mind. I think our mind too, but it's also like there's a spiritual, like we come into like God is spirit, and we fellowship with the eternal God. And you can't, like, your spirit is changed as you encounter, as you see, as you behold with the eye of your heart and your mind God and His glory. Like, you're changed. That's what Scripture says. We're transformed from one degree of glory to the other as we behold the glory of God in the face of Christ. Well, we can't you can only see that through faith, through this understanding of all the data that you're bringing in through your eyes, through your senses. When Christ is, when the knowledge that Jesus is the Son of God and all the other things that are built up around that, when that's your filter, then you can see God. You can see the glory of God. It just you perceive it as a concept, as an idea, and it's the truth. It's real, and it changes you. And I think you see that all the time, where glory. Well, people go to a show, a concert, and it's a transformative experience. They just sat and they took in a bunch of data, right? But ideas were formed and stimulated, and there's this experience. And it's the same way with the glory of God. We can think about the glory of God, and it changes us. And prayer brings us into that place where nothing external has changed, nothing material has changed, except our spirit is changed, it's touched. And so I think in a lot of little ways, I've experienced that too. Right?
I totally agree. I was going to bring up something similar about I feel like that's the experience of sanctification. It's the experience of John 15. Abide in me and I'll abide in you and you'll be fruitful. Apart from me, nothing happens. And really, it's like, the closer we are to Jesus, through prayer, but through beholding him, through the word, it starts to change us. Like you said, the situation doesn't change, but somehow we're transformed, and that's the beauty of it. And so yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's about all that I have. Was there anything that kind of stuck out to you, Mr. Caleb?
Yeah, this um, just the message of expect Christ to be, and there's a lot of different thoughts I have. Without taking too long, I guess just saying, like, the message on Sunday, it was kind of clear and powerful to me, especially about when it's a shift in your thinking, it's a shift in your worldview. You begin to see, and all these scripts, the world just presses you, and it, between the world and then, the impending death at the end of your life that I think we're conscious of very, very early, and our experience in the world, those two things really press us into this mold of worldly ideas. And God is completely opposite to whatever we learn in these conditions. The things we learn in these conditions, we internalize these scripts, whether it's out of pride or whether it's out of fear or whether it's out of defiance, or whether whatever it is, we can't attain to the knowledge of self that comes through the knowledge of God. But this woman encounters Jesus, and all of these scripts change. She's not lost. She's not alone. She's not dirty. She's not a victim. She's not anything. Like, none of them. And these are all those, you had that word web on the board. These are the experience of people's life. Like, this is everything that people experience on one end. Well, and she's kind of on one particular end, right? Where you might have the Roman soldier who's proud, arrogant, violent, seeking power, seeking prestige, and getting it, right? Famous, honored. So, like, but it doesn't matter. Like, all of these scripts need to fall away. And I think that's when we are the most truly human, is when God reaches us and touches us. And it's not pride, and we're not looking at the world and we're being pressed in this mold in the scripts of our mind, imprinted with the fingerprint of the world. We're touched, and like all of that's ripped away. Just, this is what God intended for life to be. I think that the woman in that moment, as she goes to tell everyone, I think that's maybe the closest picture, that whole scenario of what heaven will be like when we are made perfect and all of those scripts fall away. It'll be that degree of joy and contentment that just overflows, right? The overflow of life and love that And I love what you said. People who were avoiding this woman, like it was their script. They avoided her. She wasn't one of them, and she avoided them because they made her uncomfortable. And all of that just becomes irrelevant because she's got something to say and share. There's this living water bubbling out of her, and it brings them together. That was really a powerful comment. You know, something right in front of you in the text, but I hadn't really thought about that before, actually. Beautiful stuff, man.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what can add much more to that.
Yeah.
You know, just a beautiful scene, like you said. That's about all that I have. Thank you for joining us for Living in the Scriptures Live. And
Yeah.
this is Life here at McLaurin. Blessings.
Take care, everybody. We'll see